CDS current environment connector, and some people might get confused, especially from people who are coming from the Dynamics background. Um, they they think that, okay, we need to integrate with the Dynamics, and they should start using the Dynamics 365 connector, which is not the case. So actually, Microsoft has recommended us to use the CDS government environment connector, and that is the main connector that you should use for all of the cloud flows with Dataverse or Dynamics 365. But for any chance, if you want to use the CDS current environment connector or the old CDS connector for some reason, just like using the aggregate functions or some functions which are not available in the current environment connector, you can differentiate these two. The CDS current environment connector has with the dot dot dots at the end, and also in the action you can see there's a current environment connector. So this is Microsoft has mentioned that this is a recommended connector. It should be the first choice when you choose it. Whenever you start building, you just use the CDS current environment connector. Only if it is not any functionality is missing, any feature gap, you just use the other connectors. And because it is once you import into the other environment, it is automatically activated even before there was connection references. And this is all in one connector with the advanced options like filtering attributes and this run as and postpone until, which is not available in the normal CDS connector. And Microsoft is no longer investing on the CDS connector, and all the new functionalities are just added to the predict or get upload the file image content, relate and relate records, and calling the bound action or unbound action. And it also has this better query in the list rows action, where you can select query or use the fetch XML. But there are some places for CDS connector, which is sometimes referred to as the classic or older CDS connector. It is where you integrate with other environments when we can choose the different environments to connect from this trigger to connect to the trigger and create a role in another environment where we can use this one, which is not currently possible with the current environment connector. And there are also certain scenarios like aggregate in the list records and setting the null value and on-demand trigger and logic apps. So in those cases, we just have to use the CDS current environment connector. Microsoft has a deprecation plan for this one. They will deprecate it in future, but they haven't announced the date yet. But for Dynamics 365, when should we use? We should never use it anymore because it has been deprecated, and Microsoft has announced it in the 5th of May 2020. So if you still have old flows, with this connector, convert them as soon as possible. So as I mentioned, always try to use the CDS current environment connector. If there's any feature gaps which is not available in the current environment connector, use the CDS connector and never use the Dynamics 365 connector. So another one is the section is about the trigger parameters, where we explain a little bit about the filtering attributes and filter expressions. So it's always recommended to set the filtering attributes. It is like for those who came from Dynamics 365 background, it is just like the classic workflow. You set which update of this column value should trigger this flow. It should trigger only for a specific column value update. Otherwise, it could cause the infinite loop if the flow itself update this row and it call the flow itself. And also it prevents from unnecessary calling from this flow. And for the flow, there's additional one thing it comes with it is the filter expression, which is not available in classic workflow, which is you can state this flow should only trigger when the value become this value. So I want to trigger the flow when account is deactivated. I can say that no state code equal 1. So when I deactivate the account, it will call this flow. Otherwise, if I reactivate the flow, it will not call again. So this is equivalent to this kind of situation. So it will throw a call with the state code, and it will check in the call with the flow itself. Um, we can check the status, and if it is 1, it do something. Otherwise, we just terminate the flow. Instead of that, we can just filter in the trigger itself. So that's one good thing with the filter expression. And the next session is about the list parameters, where I explain about the select filter query and how to use the expand query and this fetch XML. And select query, I always really recommend to populate the select query when you use the list records or get a row, because this is not only just to enhance the performance, it's also helped you only filter and show the related values in the next step. Let's imagine if we don't have this filter one, right? If we don't have this in the select query, and if we go to the next step and show in the dynamic value, we can see like dozens of columns, like all columns in that table, in the contact table. But by adding the select query over here, it makes it easier. It will only show the full name and other um, the default values coming with the output parameter. So it's not only enhance the performance, it also help you, design the flow better. And not only that, if you don't specify the select query or filter or the top count, the flow check over complaint when you save or when you run, it doesn't give you one error, but it will give you a warning that this one needs to be improved by selecting one of the parameters. So that's important to set the select query. But it is a bit different for the lookups, selecting the select query. This is the lookup name created by, but for the auditor query, the lookup column name, you have to select the underscore column name and underscore value. That is important to set it so that it will come. This will come as a value. But I just also added the first one because if I don't add the first one with the column name of the lookup itself, it will not populate and it will not come up in this dynamic value for some reason, even though it is not the actual one. It is probably they are reading from the schema. So normally when I want to add the lookup column in the select query, I add both the column name and underscore column name underscore value. That is for specifically for only for lookup. For the other columns, you can just add the column name. Let's go to the filter query. So let's imagine we want to build a filter, like get the contact inactive contact related to the current account that is created 7 days ago, and the name begins with des. And as you can see, the filter query for this is just like this. And I came from a developer background, and even I cannot write this kind of filter query by hand, like it's from my memory. I don't remember all these syntax, especially Microsoft Dynamics CRM specific syntax. So one of the tools that's really useful is the Fetch XML Builder in XML Toolbox. And in this tool, you just write your fetch XML or download and paste from advanced file, wherever you like. And after that, you just click on View and Bar Automate Parameters. And that will give you this filter query that you want. And all you have to do is just paste this value in the flow filter query text box. So expand query is important when you want to query the data from the related tables. So I want to query from the from the contact. I want to query from the created by user, modified by user, or prefer system user values. Otherwise, you have to query for contact, and I get the GUID of the created by, and I query for another again for the created by user table. So you have to like a lot of multiple queries. In order to eliminate all these queries, you can query all these tables in just one go. You can also use the fetch XML to build that expand query because it also has this expand query text box when you linked inner join with the related table. If you do the expand query, you will see in the created by first name. So the format it shows is the lookup column name and the column name of the that's table. So that is in the for the expand query for the simple lookup in the one level, but it doesn't show the dynamic content doesn't show for the polymorphic lookups. Let's say in the contact there's a lookup called company name, which is a customer lookup for both contact and organization. In that case, it doesn't show up just like this in the dynamic content. Dynamic content doesn't show like this. So you have to do like burst JSON. And once you get the burst JSON, you can get the fee values from here. Let's say here industry code, account number, website URL, where this one is expanding to the from the contact to the account table. To do the burst JSON, all you have to do is you have to run the flow once, and once you run the flow once, you click to download for the outputs, and you copy this value from here to the end of the value. You copy it and you generate from the sample, and you click on it to generate the schema of this burst JSON. It's the same, like if you're query for a multiple level of the lookup, you want to query from the related table of the related table, you can use this nested expand to get it. And if you are more, if you don't want to use the burst JSON, if you are more proficient with your expressions, writing the expressions, you can use the expressions, something like this. Whatever you get the results, and you put slash, and you get the lookup name of it, and then the name of the column, the nested column that you want. So this is how you can retrieve the multiple level of the expand query outputs without using the burst JSON step. And for more really complex scenarios, some people, like even some of my colleagues, they are not really good with OData style expand or filter, so they just use the fetch XML query, and it's also totally fine. And I also don't see any significant performance difference. Yes, that's for this filter query, expand query. And another part is the getting and setting the values. So for the getting and setting the values, the first part is the one of the tricks I would like to share with you is using the length. So if you want to check whether there's the values returned from the list rows action is empty or not, and you can use this length column length function for the output of this list records, and then you can check in the condition is greater than 0. So that means your query returns any rows more than 0 rows, you action something, otherwise you skip the thing. And there's also one tricky, like quite annoying, I would say, thing for Power Automate Cloud Flows is that in the list records action, it always returns the array value, even though we know that there's only one value. Let's say there's only one queue with the mailbox.test.com. So if let's say we just query that, we know that there's a one record coming, and we use this queue ID, and my Power Automate automatically adds apply to each, even if there's only one row. So in that case, we can use the first function and the output of the list record action, and then question mark. So the question mark is to avoid nullable exception, and the name of the column in the square brackets. And the second last one is getting the formatted values. Here you can get the formatted values. Let's say we have this option sets and lookups. Normally we can only get the integer value of the option set or GUID of the lookup values. So we can use the field name add OData community display v1 formatted value. It is not available in the dynamic drop-down list. You cannot find it if you find it in the dynamic drop-down list, but you have to write it in the expression. And so just the field name and append with this value so that you can get the text value of the option set and lookups or currency values. So the last one is to add set the JSON value of the activity body. So in the Power Automate flows, if you see this kind of input entire array, so that means you can either add the details in the just like adding the multiple add new items, or you can enter it as the array JSON. So what you can do is you can build an array JSON variable, and you can just keep appending until and you populate as the whole JSON array. That is useful when you want to add the dynamic list of email recipients in the email activity and also the similar scenarios. Yep, that's all for today's session. So if you have any questions, you can ask in the chat window, and I will. It's over to the next session. Asim.
Thank you.
If you don't have any questions, sorry, go on, please.
I'll go ahead, please.
Do we have any questions? Okay, Lynn, I have got a couple of questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, when you showed created by underscore value, how do we get to know that this should come as a value? Is it because it is lookup?
Yes. If for the lookup columns, we need to specify with that um, formats. Or if you want to, if you use, let's say, Power Automate, so let's say in the XRM toolbox, in the Power Automate parameters, the tool will just intelligent enough to show you.
That makes sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Second is, what are the key benefits of expand query like? Is it, of course, it will help us minimize the expand, help us minimize the reusability of the connectors or the premium. This will help us reduce our cost. And how deep can we go with that? So I've seen that you went, I think, 3 tier from one to second to third. So what is the depth level? Because in XRM toolbox, I think or in when we use from API from XRM, like, which is the new get package of CDS. If we do that, I think there is a limit that you cannot go beyond 2 or something.
Mhm.
So yeah, how far can we go with this?
We can go up to 11 expand command. It's the limit of the API.
Okay.
Yeah. I think in the latest version, we can do the expand query more than 2 level up here. It just need to be the outer join.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I never knew this. Thanks.
Yeah.
I think that's it from my end. If we have any other questions, that's great.
No, I don't see any further questions in the chat window. But it's all good. If anyone has any question, please you can ask later on. So